Hey everybody, let's talk about the lunar eclipse in Pisces that's coming up in a few days' time. Today is the 1st of September 2025, here in the Southern Hemisphere at least. And the lunar eclipse in Pisces, which will be at 15 degrees of Pisces, is coming up on the 7th of September. Today, Saturn has just gone back into Pisces. So this energy right now that we're going to experience over the next week. And I really want to say for all of September actually is very much connected to the new moon in Virgo that we had about a week or so ago. And now we've come to what we will be coming to the full moon point, which is a total lunar eclipse. So very powerful energy. Lunar eclipses are very powerful. They are very different to solar eclipses in that solar eclipses generally tend to bring up events on an external level a lot more, and lunar eclipses do tend to bring up more internal content, sometimes quite chaotic, and Pisces can be very chaotic. Um, on the 22nd of September, we have a solar eclipse in Virgo at the 29th degree of Virgo. And this particular lunar eclipse that's coming up, there's some very interesting patterns around it, which I'll bring up the chart in a moment and we can look at a few patterns. But there is definitely, without question, something very, very prominent coming to a close. And Saturn's entrance back into Pisces is mirroring that perfectly. So let me just bring up the chart so that we can have some visuals. Okay. So this is the chart for the lunar eclipse. 8th of September in the Southern Hemisphere, 7th of September for you guys in the Northern Hemisphere. So there's the moon at 15 degrees of Pisces. Now, as I said today, Saturn went back into Pisces, and that marks a very significant part of the cycle that we are yet to complete. So there's Saturn in Pisces, which happens today. There's the full moon, total lunar eclipse. Of course, opposite the sun, that's what a full moon is, sun-moon opposition. And there's the south node, and there's Mercury as well, conjunct the sun, but behind the sun. Jupiter in Cancer is really going to support a lot of this process because it's not going to be an easy lunar eclipse. So the good thing is that Jupiter is forming a trine to the full moon, and it also has a wide trine to Saturn as well. And that's going to be of great help to us. Now, there is another pattern here going on with Chiron opposite Mars. And both Chiron and Mars are squaring Jupiter. So these are the main themes that I'm going to just unpack one at a time. So with Pisces and Virgo, which is the polarity, the axis that is really illuminated as we are in the heart of eclipse seasons. And because Pisces, pardon me, Virgo and Pisces is one of the most complex axes or polarities in the wheel, it really challenges us both on an emotional level, spiritual level, and on a realistic, practical, everyday level, Pisces, Virgo. And there can be this position that we take where everything can feel just, emotionally sometimes just way too overwhelming, the Pisces lunar eclipse. And then the Virgo aspect, particularly with Mercury in Virgo there as well, although Mercury in Virgo is extremely dignified because it's in its rulership position, but it is also very close to the South Node. So there is an indication here that we are, formulating mentally, um, formulating mental constructs and ideas towards the present and the future, right? Analyzing thoughts and ideas and attitudes that we've had, about our past, really, all sorts of patterns and behaviors connected to our past. And uh, because this is happening on the eclipse, it'll likely activate and animate those areas in our life to do with Virgo Pisces, where on the one hand, we have to completely trust and surrender, full moon in Pisces. And on the other hand, the Virgo axis with the South Node, Sun and Mercury, we also have to apply discretion and discernment. So it's not about getting lost in the ocean of Pisces, or it's not about staying at the Virgo end of being really judgmental or really critical about ourselves or others or whatever it may be, but somehow establishing a balance between this axis so that we can have a clear sense of discernment, Virgo, and we can also surrender to perhaps what is very difficult for us to surrender to, because the surrendering does have a lot to do with really releasing a lot of what we've lived and experienced. And the hallmark of that is Saturn going back into Pisces. Saturn will be in Pisces until February of 2026. So, this is like the finale, right? The final passage. We are being given, if you like, one last opportunity, as it were, relative to Saturn in Pisces, to finalize the themes and patterns. And that has to do with relationships. It has to do with our construct of life. Saturn is the conscious construct of our life. And Saturn at the end of the wheel means that there is a profound closure coming up to the surface now. And it has been coming up for quite some time, as Saturn has been in Pisces for the last, over 2 years. So we've had quite a while to process this. And it is a sense of death as well, because it is a point of completion, letting go and releasing, simply because nothing remains stagnant, nothing remains the same, and the only certainty is impermanence. That is, that everything is cyclical and everything changes and everything moves. And these final months with Saturn in Pisces are going to be perhaps a more intensified process for all of us, for the next few months, because it's literally going to bring up situations or matters or conditions in our life circumstances where we haven't done the completion. We haven't said goodbye to certain things. We haven't closed certain things that we need to, in order for the preparation of when Saturn gets back into Aries and, of course, forms a conjunction, the true conjunction to Neptune when they are both at 0 degrees of Aries. So, and Neptune's also going to dip back into Pisces. So there is something, on a collective scale that is a true process of surrendering and trust. And it's a big ask, because given the narrative of what's been projected on the earth, we are experiencing dire straits on every single level. So our faith, which is Jupiter, is being tested to the absolute hilt. And Jupiter in Cancer is its exalted position, so it's a very powerful Jupiter, and it really can help us be supported through this lunar eclipse portal. And the support is coming in from the point of view, again, it's asking us to actually to have faith, to trust. Jupiter is about faith and trust. And, with Pisces, it can be very blurry. The vision can be very blurry. It might be, very confusing to make sense of everything. And that's where we have to rely back onto the Mercury in Virgo to bring in the discernment and create as much clarity as we can, and also take ownership and responsibility of our own emotional position, emotional experiences, uh, emotional connections, um, emotional blind spots, all that stuff that's involved in our emotional life. It's very important here because Saturn is actually also conjunct this lunar eclipse. And when Saturn is conjunct the moon in Pisces, that's a really tough aspect, to be really honest. It does indicate, some type of severing, some type of separation. But the separation that might come through in certain situations or connections or relationships, and it will be all of that for all of us in different ways based on our circumstances. The difficulty of the separation is the painful element that it could bring up. It can be like a sense of loss, having to have to separate from something or someone. But the gift that is in that energy, once we trust and surrender into what it is we need to release, the gift of Saturn here, because Saturn is the greatest teacher. He's the magician. He is the one that really helps us turn our pain into gold, like an alchemical process. So a more simple way to put that, instead of using esoteric language, would be to say that if we can recognize in this portal what comes up for us emotionally that has been very difficult or is very difficult or is very painful, if we can recognize what that is about, what it is anchored into within us relative to our life story and circumstances, we can have like this spiritual kind of bypass, as it were. Not, I don't know if bypass is the wrong word, because I'm not talking about bypassing it like disregarding it, but rather rising up into it by feeling it all. And when you take that responsibility, which is Saturn, there can be, a burst of emotional growth that comes through this portal. So basically, it's about being able to be emotionally responsible for everything that you feel and everything you may be projecting as well. It's a tough one because it's, Saturn doesn't allow us to, sort of play around and it's not a game when it comes to Saturn. It's serious business, but Saturn is a very rewarding divinity when we can actually step up to the plate of where we need to step up to, with just for ourselves, within ourselves. So this is huge karmic emotional clearing, Saturn conjunct the full moon, and an opportunity for us to create a clean slate, if you like, in preparation for when we step into February and Saturn is done with being in Pisces and will not get back there for another 30 years. So this is a really big deal. Now, obviously, for people who are much younger, there's a different correspondence or connection to this. But for people that are older, this story goes way, 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 way back. You can track, the last 30 years of your life if you're old enough, and really think about what Saturn has been teaching you the last 30 years as it's stepped through your birth chart, where it spends approximately 2.5 years in every area of your chart. So, this is literally the last opportunity to really clear the slate. And to clear the slate, and to prepare for new fertile ground and territory and foundations to bring a new and more improved version, if you like, or more developed or more mature, because Saturn corresponds to emotional maturity, especially in Pisces. So the more we can clear this stuff, the more we are able to bring forth and give birth to perhaps a new version of ourselves. It is always very, very difficult and very challenging to let go of experiences that we've had in the past, because some of them have been wonderful, right? Not every experience is terrible. We have, a vast range of so many different experiences. And the ones that are really juicy, that are really enjoyable, that are really happy moments, they're the hardest to let go of, because why would you want to let go of something that was so beautiful? In that context, you don't really let it go in the sense where you just forget about it. In fact, I don't think we ever forget anything, whether it was a good experience or a bad experience, just to use simple language. So this is not a mental process of trying to say to yourself, I've got to forget about that, or I've got to disregard that. It's much deeper than that, much deeper than just a mental adjustment. There's something very deeply deeply profound that's been called within us to release, full moon eclipse in Pisces conjunct Saturn. So it's not going to be easy, but this all also connects to even what I spoke about in my previous video, which was about Venus opposite Pluto, and numerous other things that I mentioned during that time, relationships and things like that. So this lunar eclipse is part and parcel of those relationship matters as well. And Mars opposite Chiron, right? And squaring Jupiter, which means that there is a T-square here, right, during this lunar eclipse. And Jupiter is at what's called the apex point. So Jupiter is the one that resolves the energy that Chiron and Mars are working on, right? So an opposition between two planets, which is what the full moon is, an opposition. An opposition is a portal of energy where we need to step into the middle of those two energies, and we need to find a way to integrate. So what are we integrating here? We are integrating and understanding our own deep wounds of our own self, Chiron in Aries, what we've had to endure with Chiron in Aries, which has been a very long journey. Aries is one of the signs where Chiron spends quite a few years in. So it's been a very profound journey for the world. Everyone has experienced some sense of wounding relative to autonomy, self-expression, and so forth. It's the world, the way it's projected is, it's beyond chaotic. I like what Eckhart Tolle says. He said, the ego is self-destructing. He said this about 2 years ago in a live video he did with Russell Brand, actually, but this is something that he's been talking about for many years. But he was just recognizing that, about 2 years ago, that the vastness of the chaos and turbulence and cataclysmic nature of the world events, the collective ego is in massive crisis and it's self-destructing. And he was laughing when he was saying it. Um, and it is, and that's the the way that looks in the world is all the events that you were seeing, which is the conflict, the protesting, everything that's going on, because there's this, in one way or another, there's so many issues that have come to the surface since Pluto has been in Capricorn and now Pluto in Aquarius, and they are all, Aquarius and Capricorn correspond so much to humanity and the systems, right? So what was hidden and buried for such a long time has just blown up and exploded like a volcano. And, the human race is reacting to it, right? And there are some good things that are coming out of that, but there are also incredibly destructive things that are coming out of it, because the I want to say evil forces that try to control everything, really don't like humanity resisting or pushing back, you know. And so because we've had a lot of that, and then we've got all these other things happening in between, there's this push and pull and chaotic whirlwind, right? Uh, just happening on a day-to-day basis. So everyone has experienced feeling a sense of wounding through that, which is why I'm just, bringing that story up, connecting to Chiron in Aries. But in the present moment, relative to this lunar eclipse, the Chiron opposite Mars really just, and squaring Jupiter, is just saying to us to really take ownership and um, recognize where we have been wounded and how we might independently work on that by going into ourselves and finding the root that it connects to, because every type of wounding that happens, which for the most part comes from an external, as it appears from an external source, situation, condition, whatever, we that's the hook, but it is the internalized root of where it hits that we need to assess, recognize, address, and try and work on. And, Mars in Libra here in this case is also bringing in the matter of balance and harmony, right? In how we initiate our anger, Mars, how we assert our energy, our drive, our motivation, our desires. Mars in Libra is actually in its detrimental position, but if we can take something positive out of it, it would be to really bring in a sense of harmony and balance in how we might push and initiate certain things. The fortunate thing, even though this is a T-square, and T-squares can be very difficult to resolve, because Jupiter is at the apex and Jupiter is in Cancer, it's very, very favorable, particularly because Jupiter forms a trine to the North Node, to the full moon, and to Saturn. And Jupiter is the ruler of the full moon, the North Node, and Saturn, all in Pisces. So Jupiter in a trine aspect to that Pisces part of the chart is very, very supportive to us. It's saying to us, look, there is something really important that we all have to face and release and close and say goodbye to. But if you can do that and surrender into what you can't control, because in Pisces territory, you cannot control anything. It's the opposite of control. It's actually stepping into a field where you just simply have to surrender. Surrender to what you can't see. Surrender to the source, the ultimate source creation to all things. Now, this is language that I'm using, so it's not an easy thing to do, is my point. but this is what we are being asked to do. And we are being asked to do it through the support of Jupiter in Cancer, which is very, very, very hopeful and very favorable. It really helps us. And also the Jupiter squaring the Chiron Mars, the issues that we've got around the wounds that we've experienced, be it in our relationships or be it through the world and the events that are going on and the like. Again, Jupiter being, at the apex point of the opposition between Chiron and Mars is saying, look, if you can, get to a point within yourself, right, where you can recognize what is activated within you, relative to Mars Chiron themes, which can be deep fucking wounds, deep anger and deep wounds about anything, about what this person said, what that person did, about what the world is doing, yada yada yada. It goes on and on and on. We've all got a lot to fucking complain about, really. But then on the other hand, you know, I always think to myself, if I'm, feeling really activated by a certain situation or event, I just remind myself, well, what about a kid who's lying in the street who's got no legs and no arms? How the fuck could I complain? We've always got to bring things into fucking perspective. And we've got to have gratitude for every single day that we are here is a gift for us to grow. And Jupiter being in these harmonious aspects to all the Pisces energy and, yes, squaring Chiron Mars is helping us. It's helping us tap into a deeper, much deeper sense of trust and faith, regardless of how cataclysmic everything is. Because even this cataclysmic wave, which is incredibly intense on numerous levels and layers, it too will have an end point because nothing stays the same. Nothing. So, in this particular lunar eclipse, it is simply about emotional clearing, healing, taking responsibility for what we feel, clearing certain things up inside of ourselves because we are getting ready to step into a new earth, a new reality, a new sense of self. Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And there's still so much that we don't know about that, about what that's going to produce. But in the context of all of this as well, we are we are dealing with so many uncertainties and so many new beginnings. A new beginning always has an uncertain um, edge to it, right? Because it's a new beginning. It's like planting a seed. You can't see what's going to come. So, we've got Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries. Saturn was in Aries just even up to yesterday. This is all new fertile land that's being born. There's new developments and new pathways that are trying to come through. And our job in this process of these cycles is to align, right, with these energies and make space for them. We have to make space internally in our heart, in our emotional body, in our psychology, in our spirituality, so that we can actually continue to grow and evolve. So those are my main thoughts and reflections about this full moon. Neptune is going to go back into Pisces on the 23rd of October, which perhaps I'll come back to speak to that later. And just also with the T-square between Chiron, Mars, and Jupiter, because they are cardinal signs, cardinal energy is always about initiation. So the initiation is followed by a significant change of some kind, so this is a real initiative energy helping us push through things that are probably very difficult for one reason or another. But the thing that makes me feel the most hopeful is the fact that Jupiter is in Cancer and it forms a trine to all these Pisces energies. So it's a process of surrendering, trusting, releasing, making space on every single level, including externally, for the new paths that will come through one way or another. There's, it's we just have this tendency in our human form to attach ourselves, to hold on to things. Or every single one of us does. There's no one that could say they're not attached to anything. I doubt it. I know perhaps certain people who live a particular spiritual life, for example, certain Buddhists, because the whole Buddhist philosophy is about non-attachment. But I'm sure those people living that life and that discipline too have their own inner demons to struggle with, because they are still human. However, they are just involved in a particular discipline and practice on a daily basis. It doesn't mean that they've mastered it and they've got no issues with attachments or inner demons coming up. It would happen all the time. And in fact, even Jeffrey Wolf Green says this, the more you live that kind of life, the more you evolve, the more you detach, right? The more spiritually aligned and aware you become, the more these demonic sort of entities or forces will come through in some kind of way, because it's kind of like they're losing you. They're losing you. They're losing drinking your power and your energy. So the more you elevate, if you like, your consciousness, the more you're going to be faced with some pretty intense situations to see actually, well, how far have you come? And this lunar eclipse is part of that story as well, in the sense where it's going to emotionally stir everything up that's been kind of hooked inside us in some kind of way with certain things that we've idealized, certain disillusionments that we've had, whether it's about ourselves, our life narrative, the world narrative, whatever, right? It's going to stir all that up so that with Saturn there, so that we can actually cut through, discern through, and take responsibility of what's actually real for us in our life and how we can emotionally be more responsible and just be our own authority as well. Saturn, at the healthiest, highest level, is the ability to be your own authority on every single scale. And Saturn as well reminds us that we have to have limits. We have to know our limits. So if we are, if we are, how can I put this? If our emotional life is so clouded and we are so overwhelmed with it, and we are so confused, uh, on all those levels of life emotionally, and we've got no sense of peace, or that there's nothing sort of holding us there, helping us stay centered, if you like, and focused and aware, then, there's incredible turmoil that's going on emotionally, that's internalized and then subsequently projected everywhere, right? And Saturn here comes in and says, well, I'm going to give you the form and structure around that ocean of delusions, ideals, emotional turmoil, whatever the fuck it is that you feel, have been feeling around XYZ. Now is the time to really clear that up. And no one is going to do it for you, and no one needs to do it for you. Only you. You do it for yourself. When you do that, that's when Saturn rewards you. That's what Saturn is saying here in this picture. So even though typically a Saturn moon energy it's kind of off. It's not the nicest energy. I'll be honest about that. But this is bigger than just um, a moment of feeling the awkwardness of Saturn. This is this is really a portal of absolute release. And, lunar eclipses are about that anyway. They are about releasing and clearing. And, Saturn corresponds to karma. He's the Lord of karma, the Lord of time. So, it's time to finish those aspects of life corresponding to the Pisces area of your chart that cannot be transferred into a crystallized form because they don't have a root into reality. They were just maybe ideals and things you thought you wanted or thought you are, or whatever it is. This is where we have to get very clear about it. And that's the good thing about Saturn being conjunct this full moon. It can help us become clear, number one, and it can help us bring in the necessary boundaries and recognize when to say enough is fucking enough. Because you could be in a situation that has been, going on for some time, sort of one step forward, two steps back, or going around in a fucking circle, merry-go-round, right, in a particular situation. And it can be very difficult to jump off the merry-go-round sometimes with certain situations in our life. But this is the opportunity to do it. This is the opportunity for you to really integrate Saturn, literally just wear it like a coat and go, you know what? Fuck it. Enough is enough. I know my own limits. And I bring this up because people born at night really struggle with knowing when enough is enough. I'm one of those people. I was born at night. When you're born at night, Saturn is said to be your greater malefic. This comes from, ancient astrology, and it is a very, very valid and valuable piece of information. Those of you born during the day, Mars is your problem planet. So Saturn is the alchemist for us when we can actually integrate that energy and honor the work that we are doing in our life. So overall, I would say it's going to be pretty sensitive lunar eclipse, stirring up a lot of shit that's been lying, at the bottom of the ocean, as it were, Pisces, and bringing it all up to the surface, blown up through the full moon. The moon is a fucking spotlight, right? It illuminates everything. The full moon, or a lunar eclipse in this case, which it is, does not discriminate in the context of what it's going to show you. It's going to show you everything that you need to see. The question will be how much you are prepared to look at. And if we are prepared to really look at things very honestly with courage, Venus in Leo, courage, we can do a lot of profound work in this closure chapter of Saturn in Pisces. So I'm not saying that we have to do all this in one day. We fucking can't. That's impossible. But this is like the theme and the message around this lunar eclipse. And it's going to spill over really until the end of the year into February of 2026, which is when Saturn goes back into Aries. So we've got a few months, to really process and recognize and work with what's coming up for us. It's just that this lunar eclipse will just, bang, bring it all up into light. And what we do is up to us. Okay, so I think I'll leave it there, and I will come back soon for more. The next thing obviously will be the solar eclipse. So, the solar eclipse is at 29 degrees of Virgo. That's, in evolutionary terms, that's a significant point of closure and completion as well. It's also known as a critical degree. So, there's something really powerful that's been showing up, in the last couple of weeks and during this lunar eclipse and the Virgo solar eclipse and right through to the end of the year. And I do feel and believe that it really does connect to all our emotional bonds and connections, um, our emotional approach and style to things and life and so forth, and how we have reached a different point now, and we need to find a way to work with this new point that's coming in, because the new point is going to really take form when Saturn and Neptune come together next year at 0 Aries. So this is just the final, the final clearing stage. And it is very important, very, very important. Because one might say, well, what's going to happen to people who don't clear this stuff? What would be the likely result? And that's a very important question, but a very difficult question to answer as a one answer, because it's going to be different for every person. But I think that perhaps the common theme in for everyone would be that it'll be much more difficult to move ahead when that Saturn and Neptune come together at 0 Aries, because all we're doing by not trusting and letting old patterns and behaviors and emotional ties and this and that and the other, emotional manipulative games that people play, psychological games, little hooks they set up for you, and it goes on and on, right? This energy is saying clear it. And if you don't, then you're just resisting the inevitable. And when we are resisting the inevitable, what happens is the path comes through anyway. And because we've been resisting, it is not a smooth transition. So that's how I would answer that question if somebody asked me that. Okie dokie. Well, wishing you all the best, and I'll see you all very soon. Reach out if you'd like to work with me on a one-on-one basis. We can look at anything you'd like to look at about your life, about your birth chart, anything. Okay, much love and bye for now.